My name is Nick, and in today's video I'll be installing this Bafang BBS02 mid-drive motor on a hardtail mountain bike. And this is the bike that the conversion is going to go on, a 29er specialized stump jumper. The Bafang BBS02 kit can also be installed in a variety of other bicycles as well. Here's a look at the components that will be installed on the bike. These components will probably add approximately 22 pounds extra weight to the bike. Moving a crank and installing with another one. So we have the battery here, we have the mid-drive motor over here, then we have the chain wheel or chain ring right here with a chain ring protector. We have a wiring harness here, some zip ties. This is the stock torque arm. Over here is some bolts that go to the end over here. We have a speed sensor, we have gear shift sensors, the computer right here, crank arms. These items were purchased separately and were not included in the kit. I have a stabilizer bar or torque arm for the BBS series. I have a battery mount plate here. I have a shift sensor, which may be really important, and also a chain guide that I purchased all separately. Before I even started, the first thing I noticed that this is a 42 tooth chain ring, and I'm going to be replacing it with a 42 tooth, and notice that it's real tight right here, so I may have to add 2 more links. Another thing to note is that this Crossmax wheel set has these thicker spokes and it might not accommodate the spoke magnet, so now's the time I could also switch back to the stock regular wheel set, or at least the rear wheel being a stock one with the thinner 2.0 millimeter spokes. Alright, 20 minutes later, went ahead and changed out, put a brand new tire, changed out to a stock wheel, and also added 2 more links just using some quick links right there. Okay, first thing I do is remove the front derailleur. Depending on the bicycle you have, take a look at the bolt to remove the cable, and then go ahead and remove this bolt here for the clamp on the seat stay. Oh, sorry, it's a seat tube right here. On the left side for American bikes, you're gonna have to remove some bolts here, and also take out the grip in order to slide out the shift lever. So when these bolts are loose and you take it off, you could go ahead and take the front derailleur off. And also note that I had to also disconnect the chain here. Loosen all the bolts here, you could go ahead, slide this off, and slide these right off as well. The SRAM GXP crankset can be removed on the non-drive side. There's an 8mm bolt here just to be removed. Non-drive is self-tapping, so after I unscrewed it, it just came right out, and then you could just remove the drive side. The drive side, rotate it this way to loosen it. Non-drive side, it's going to be counterclockwise to loosen. Note the other stand didn't work because underneath the bottom bracket there interfered with where I was going to put the motor. Go ahead and slide the motor in, and the ultimate test to see if it fits. So notice when I'm sliding it in here, there's no bottom bracket, and it kind of hangs right there, and wow, it is close. Take a look at the clearance here, right here between the frame and the motor. It's real close clearance, but it fits and it works, and there are no spacers here. Look at the non-drive side, you can see that this motor can rotate up and down, so we need some type of stabilizer bar so when it pulls it doesn't shoot up. Look at the mounts here, they are a little indented or a little further in from the bottom bracket here, and that's why we have little spacers and a longer bolt. The gap is more apparent now that I lined up the stabilizer bar here, and you can see there's a gap between here and here. Using these M6 bolts by 20mm, and then there's some washers here that I could stick in between to fill in the gap. After using 3 1mm spacers in there, and this M6 looks like it fits, and this torque arm can be rotated and attached to the seat tube in that position. Now we have these 2 bolts, one here, or nuts. This one says up to 50 to 60 Newton meters to tighten, and the other cap right here is 25 to 30 Newton meters. So this one is directional, so make sure you tighten it this way in the direction of the arrow. One end of the wrench here is able to fit over that nut to be able to tighten it, and you can go ahead and just tighten it. That's tightened down and this is lined up. You could go ahead and put this cover over the other cap, screw that down, and to tighten that, it is the other side right here. So this was to tighten the lock nut, and this is for the cap. It's just right over, and you could just go ahead and tighten it. I just went ahead and put the computer on. I was able to just open this up like this and just slap it right over and snap it right over, and without any spacers needed. Also for the remote here to change and operate the computer, it has to be actually pretty far down on the lever, because if it's up in the thicker areas, as you can probably see here, it just won't fit because it's too thick. So slide it on over down. Looking down, maybe in this area, after you put your hands here, this would be a great area to have the controls. So then I went ahead and slid the throttle on to the left of it. Take note that this wire from the throttle comes out on the left side, so you're gonna have to bend it and bring it back to the center. If you do prefer, this throttle might even be better off on the right side, but I like having the throttle operated with my left thumb. The speed sensor, so the way this goes in is you have to put it in like this. So you just slide it in here. There's the connection there, and then you're gonna, when you find out the length, you screw it in to make it a more permanent connection on how far you want this from the seat stay. So let's get to that. Here does use the security screw. If you don't have the special one, you could go ahead and just use some pliers, and I've done this on the other build, just tightening it down by gripping it on the outside. So then go ahead and tighten this down a little bit to get it in place. It's still a little loose so I can move it. And when it's about 1 to 2 millimeters, or maybe less than 3 millimeters, find the spot there and make sure that when the magnet goes, it goes perpendicular this way, crosses. Make sure it doesn't cross this way. So for example, if you mounted it somehow like this, or mounted it downward, this will not trigger it. So make sure that this speed sensor is facing backwards to make sure that the magnet passes back and forth this part of the sensor for it to work. Go ahead and remove this and stick it on. The extension cable is not needed for this, so you just go ahead and line these up and stick it in real slowly, and then screw this on to tighten the speed sensor cable. You're also going to need some zip ties here, so when you do attach it here, you could zip tie it to make a secure connection around the non-drive side chainstay. Also, don't forget, I just put in the black screw right there, so this won't slide out now. All screws here are for the computer mount, and I believe the controller for the computer. 2 of them go here, one on this side and one on the other side right under here. The controls for the computer, and another one goes under there. I'm gonna go ahead and put the chainring on, and notice that if you want to put the cap over or the guard protector, it's only bolted from, it looks like, the inside. So it's gonna, you have to put the chainring on first, and then this plastic goes over. Chainring on, you just, the circle area, you just line up the circles here and slide it right on like that, and then you have the bolts to put on. Already come pre-installed with some type of thread locker. The bolts didn't line up perfectly, and this bolt that I put tape over kind of came in as a slight angle, and I almost felt like I was going to strip the thread, but it did go in, so I put tape over, so I'm not going to go tighten it anymore. But these are all tight, and then I went ahead and reinstalled the chain, and that's what it looks like in big gear and the smallest in the rear. Go ahead and install the chainring guard. You could do that, and you have to use these really tiny screws right here, and they go through here, but you have to put it on from the opposite side. Install the chainring guard. I hold on this side. I went between the rear tire and the seat tube, and I just used a Phillips screwdriver to tighten it, and then I rotate it to the next section and go ahead and put those on. Go ahead and plug in the wiring harness now. So just line up these arrows, stick them together, and on the other side of the wiring harness goes to the front of the bike, and you have a variety of cables here. So the far left one, the green one, is for the computer, the next one is for the throttle, and then these 2 are for the brake sensors. With the brake sensors, you get 2 sensors, and you get 2 magnets and some zip ties, and on the back there are some stickers on them too. Plugged in the battery for this next portion. I found a real good solution yet, but I'm thinking of just putting this somehow over here. Then when I squeeze it, this magnet gets further away from the shift sensor, and then it activates the brakes. Activating the brake sensors, as you see here, there'll be a little thing. So it activates it, and then you squeeze it, and then when you let go, it goes back down. And then that shows that the motor is cut off. It's been a long time trying to get these stock magnets here to work, and they just wouldn't work too well. It's either they were too close and the brake sensor wouldn't be activated, or they are always activated. So I switched to these larger magnets here, and that seemed to do the trick. Just like the Bafang kit, they were made in China, and this is what I got on Amazon. And this is a generic company, I think. Larger magnet, this is what it looks like. The magnet's mounted right here on the front, and I just used a bunch of black tape, and you squeeze it, and that should be far enough to disconnect it from the sensor there. Now look here, when I squeeze it, you could see the little red area right there, and that indicates that the motor's cut off. And then now it's stuck on, so then I have to kind of wiggle this a little bit and to turn it off. So it's still not perfect. I'm gonna go ahead and try to install this shift sensor. This was an additional part, did not come with the kit. And it connects to the short cable coming out of the main wiring harness from the Bafang motor. I'm going to go ahead and remove this, maybe cut the end off cable, pull the cable all the way out, and since I'm putting in a new motor, I might as well put in a brand new stainless steel cable, 1.2 millimeters in diameter by 2100 millimeters. And loosen the 5 millimeter there, and this should come loose, and then you can go ahead and use some cutters if you want to, because you're changing it, and just cut it and take it out. The SRAM X7 shifter, I had to remove 4 little Allen screws on the bottom and pull the cable out this way and try to leave that spring intact. I'm going to connect the derailleur cable through here. It's going to be a little loose, but then I'm going to use a bunch of tape and just tape it in real good there. So that way, if I do ever switch back to non-e-bike, I'll go ahead and still have this, and I won't have to worry about cutting more cable housing. Okay, so this isn't the right way to mount it, but after all said and done, I put a bunch of duct tape over it, and even as you can see when I'm shifting and the cable is getting a little tighter, it's not budging at all. It's just staying put, so that's good. Let's take a look at the battery mount. So this right here is where you're supposed to mount the battery. Somewhere in between here. However, when you put it next to it, it's already too far below, so you're going to need an adapter to move these mounts up further so I can mount the battery closer to up here, like those two. I went ahead and got this adapter here. It's also sold by the same company on Amazon, and you can move it up or down like this and then mount the battery at a higher position. Metal on metal contact, or this metal on aluminum, is not that great, so I put some tape on the bottom before I install it here. The metal bar does add some stack height, and that's just enough stack height, unfortunately, so that this battery won't be able to fit in here. It hits the top and I can't even get it in because it's stacked a little too tall. I didn't account for that extra distance there. Okay, without the bar, it works, but however, there's only one screw that can fit, and it's the upper of the 2 screws. The lower screw, there's no mount here. This is what it looks like, and only the upper of the 2 water bottle mounts is there. There's nothing right here, so I'm gonna have to get some straps, battery straps, to make it more secure. Installing the crank arms are fairly simple and straightforward. Make sure you have the right direction, or the proper. So right is the drive side. It could go this way, it could go this way, or there's no particularly set way that you have to put it onto the square taper here. I also put a little lubricant on the outside here. And for the bolt, make sure to use Loctite. So just have some medium strength thread locker. And for these, both sides to tighten, turn it clockwise to tighten the bolt. The hardware that I had to find aftermarket is M4 by 12 millimeter for the computer here. Using these right here, M4 by 12, and they're right there. Just like the Bafang kit, I got a Chinese made chain guide, and that'll go up here to go over the chain. There's a 34.9 millimeter clamp, and then there's the chain guide right there with some hardware. To look at the chain keeper, I had to mount this bracket underneath and not on the top, because when I mounted top and this hung downward, it interfered with a battery. This also took quite a bit longer to install than expected because the bolt is behind the torque arm there. On the headlight, I went ahead and attached it to the side of the fork here with a zip tie here and then another zip tie along the top of the fork here to keep the zip tie from falling into the sanctions. Already losing a lot of bar real estate with all these levers, so I didn't want to put this up here in case I want to add something to the handlebar, such as a Garmin or another light. A closer look at the connection, however, it is a little loose, so I'll probably put another zip tie and maybe some tape as well. All said and done, this is what it looks like. Ideally, if you had a mount here, that would be the best place to mount it. I also thought about mounting it up here, but every single bump, since it is on the bottom part of the suspension, will be quite rough. For cable management, I have a bunch of zip ties and some black duct tape and scissors, and I'm just going to run it up here and on the side or underneath the top tube. These little stoppers for this frame, so I'm going to run it on the side, and as you can see here, I already put some tape right over here and wrapped it and tied it right along the side next to the other cables. Okay, after routing all the cables, it should look or can look something similar to this. What's in the front of the bike here, there's all those cables right there, so it's not the cleanest look, but it does work. One thing you also want to test is when you're turning this wheel completely all the way in both directions, that the cables don't get snagged here. With the pedals installed and the battery installed, you should be all good to go for a nice test ride. So let's talk about 9 things you need to know about installing your Bafang motor onto a bicycle with this kit. Number 1 is the shift sensor. One thing you may not have noticed is that I started with SRAM X9 or X7, and now I ended up with changing out the whole drivetrain to Shimano 11-speed SLX. That was because the X7 shifter broke, and I was able to mount the shift sensor right there because it required a shorter, actually it required a longer cable there. So by adding this, I was able to get the same cable to work. Now number 2, let's talk about the aftermarket chain guide seen right here. The chain guide is working fairly well, and the chain has not dropped off during the test rides, so that works out actually really well. So I'm going to show test rides. The chain guide held on the chain to the front chain ring really well. However, I've had this bike for several months now and rode hundreds of miles, and on the first gear it doesn't work well. It'll fall off the front of the chainring onto the inner side of the crankset, so the chain falls off and it does not work. So that leads us to number 3, which is Chainline. And so let's go ahead and talk all about Chainline. Here's 6 out of 11, which is right in the center. There's 5 above and 5 below, and we'd go here to take a look at the Chainline. From there all the way to the cassette, the Chainline looks fairly decent here. Going down, however, it does look like it is slightly pointed in the direction towards the lower, smaller cogs. 8 here out of 11, it looks like the chain line's better here. Like more of a straight chain line on gear number 8. So it looks like the chain goes straight from there all the way down to this gear right here, 8 out of 11. Gear 7 out of 11, 11 being the far right. Chain, and it comes back to here, and it looks like gear 8 might be slightly better for the chain line. And if that's the case, the difference or distance between 8th cog and the 6th cog is 9.5 millimeters. So you need to add additional 9.5 millimeters to the offset. So rather than 5.5, that takes you to a 15 millimeter offset. A chain ring with an offset for this BBS02 between 10 to 15 millimeters is better, especially if you want to use this lower gear without it potentially falling off the chain ring. The sources say that a mountain bike chain line with a typical 73 millimeter bottom bracket has a chain line of approximately 48 millimeters. Meters are referring us to is the very middle of the bottom bracket here to the middle of a chain ring here that lines up perfectly in the middle of the cassette on this side right there. So that's 48 millimeters, what it's supposed to be for this mountain bike. Down, you can see where the bottom bracket is here, and there's a big inner area for the motor, and then there's the chain right here. And this chain ring also has an offset of 5.5 millimeters. Calculations, without the offset chain ring, the normal chain line for this BBS02 is 59 millimeters, which is 11 millimeters lower towards the outside of the bicycle than a standard chain line. So it's very far off. We just get a chain ring with an offset of 11 millimeters to go from 59 millimeters to 48 millimeters, then we'll have a perfect chain line, right? Well, yes, in theory it makes sense. However, you have to look at your frame to see if there's clearance for that. And this frame does not have that clearance. So let me show you what I'm looking at. 42 tooth chainring, you can see it's really close to the frame right there. And the distance between the chainring and the chainstay right here is only 2 millimeters. This chainring has a 5.5 millimeter offset. So the most this could take is probably 7 millimeter offset, and they don't make a chainring with 7 millimeter offset that I'm aware of. Even if you were to go to a smaller chainring, it may still interfere with the chain stays right there. They can't get much smaller than a 40 tooth chainring with a huge offset because this is in the way here. So this is a 44. By the time you're getting down to 40, it gets smaller. If you wanted a 32 chainring, this plastic thing will interfere, and I will show you where it interferes over here. Perfect offset, this chain would have to be about 1 centimeter over. However, if you have a smaller chainring, it interferes right here. And this is part of the whole motor assembly, so you can't change this out. Unfortunately, you're kind of stuck with a 40 tooth or larger chainring for this mountain bike setup. However, the motor can overcompensate your legs, especially my legs, and make up for the power that you need to climb faster in a higher gear. 7-speed, this largest chainring is actually offset 1.8 millimeters or so inwards. So I haven't really used this #1 gear at all. I always use #2 as the lowest, even climbing steep ascents. In my opinion, I think you're better off with a 10-speed, 9-speed, or 8-speed rear cassette rather than the 11-speed that is more offset. I don't have any experience with a 12-speed, but I don't think it's compatible with Shimano 12-speed due to the chain being perhaps too thin. But I haven't experienced that, so it might work for you, but I'm not sure about 12-speed. 12-speed, the Super Boost chain line can be approximately 55 millimeters, and with this chain line at 59 millimeters and a 5.5 millimeter offset, puts you almost right exactly at 55 millimeter chain line. So it'd be really good if the 12-speed were to work with a Super Boost frame. Super Boost, I'm talking about through axle, 148 millimeters wide. This standard mountain bike setup is a 135 millimeter from axle to axle with disc brakes with a quick release lever. Now let's talk about the speed sensor and how it is directional. So I'll show you how I installed it and what the final product looks like. Speed sensor here on the left or non-dry side chainstay, and you can see the speed sensor is right above right here. How the magnets will pass this way, up and down, like this way. And it does not have to be mounted here. You could mount it over here, closer to the disc brake. You could mount it here, or even further out, depending on your seat stays and the clearance. To make sure mine is about 1 millimeter. The magnet passes about 1 millimeter between here and the magnet. You can see that this chainstay curves outward, more outwards this way. So if you actually need more space and can't mount it here, feel free to move it further back so you get more clearance, because this sensor can always go inward further, but it cannot go any further outward once you pull it all the way in. Compatibility with the bottom bracket. So this is an English thread BSA or 74 millimeters wide threaded bottom bracket. It should also work with a 68 millimeter bottom bracket. However, if you have a 100 millimeter or a fat bike, I'm not sure the compatibility on it, but I've seen that spindles with 100 millimeters should work with the larger fat bikes. 8 millimeter version, I needed spacers for the add-on torque arm as seen here. This is either called the stabilizer bar or torque arm, and I ended up using a actual band clamp here rather than zip ties. Zip ties did not work, and even those wire ties, they might not work as well too. For this stabilizer arm or torque arm, there is 2 millimeters of spacer, and I needed longer bolts as I explained a little earlier in the video. 2 bolts that are long enough with the associated spacers if you're going to use this stabilizer bar, which I do recommend. We already started talking about it, and which is the torque arm. There are a few different types. One connects to the seat tube here. There was another one that kind of connects to the bottom where you rotate the motor upwards underneath here, and it kind of sits flush against the down tube here on the bicycle. Stock torque arm comes with little rivets, and it sits on the inside here and it bites into your frame. There's like these little rivets, and you clamp it and tighten it on here, and it eats into the frame and it could gouge your frame. Types of these, this is a standard one. Maybe I should have opted for the heavy duty one, which is another millimeter thicker. This one looks like it's bending after a few hundred miles of use. Too bad. Maybe just a little bit of bending there going on. Is the chainring bolts. Well, they don't line up perfectly, and the tolerances aren't that perfect. This isn't the most expensive bicycle kit. They didn't line up perfectly, however, it still fit, and I was able to make it work. So just keep that in mind that things might not be perfect with your build. I'd like to talk about the hydraulic brake sensors for mountain bikes or any bikes where you're having a motor extra weight. You probably want better brakes. So I opt for hydraulic disc brakes, and I do recommend them. However, the sensors that come with the Bafang kit, or they are sold separately, aren't the best quality. The finished product here. The side wasn't too sticky, and there's a little gaps here, so I used some black duct tape. I also used the aftermarket magnets, and I taped it onto the brake lever right there. And when I pull it down, it pulls it away far enough to engage or disengage the magnet from the sensor. Or the left side, I put the sensor here and the magnet is right there, and it engages the sensor to disengage the motor when I'm about this far away. Then when I let go, it re-engages the motor. They are either on the top or in front here. I wouldn't say that one way is better than the other. You just have to see what works best for you. Let's talk about the battery and the infamously hard to install battery mount onto the frame. Now, I went ahead and also bought an adapter. However, that did not fit. So I'll show you what I ended up doing. At first, I was just using the top bolt and the battery. So only one screw was on, but it would be loose and it could move this way. So in order to compensate, I have straps, these battery straps, and I strapped it around the bike. It looks something like this: a strap up here and a strap down here to cinch it onto the down tube to hold the battery in place to prevent it from kind of rotating this way. I wanted something a little more sturdy, so I went ahead and used the top portion screw and made an adapter mount for that. Top mounting water bottle bolt is right here, and the lower one is here, so the water bottle cage is supposed to fit right here. However, the bolt mounts for this Bafang is here and here, so there is no drilled mount right here where it's supposed to go. For this lower bolt, I used the upper bolt on the frame, tighten that all the way there, and for this upper one, I used a piece of wire coat hanger there. A coat hanger long enough here to go from the top here all the way down here, and I used a bunch of zip ties to go through here, up over the coat hanger and around the frame. From the outside, I put some tape here because that's where the end of the zip ties were, and they're a little sharp, and I don't want to bang my knee on here in case that I'm pedaling. about all I could fit or had clearance for, and it seemed to hold up quite well. Move, see, side to side. Before I used to rotate this way, and now that this is here and it's bolted on right here, it doesn't swing at all. Took a mountain biking on some rough terrain and actually forgot the straps, and it just held on just fine. So it should be okay, but it's definitely not recommended if you want to use straps or drill a hole in your frame, which probably even worse idea. I wouldn't do that. I'm not sure what other ideas, so if you have any suggestions on how to mount the battery, especially if the adapter doesn't fit because it adds stack height like another 5 to 10 millimeters and interferes with the clearance of your battery, then I'm not sure what you do other than mounting it perhaps on the rack or another location. Bonus for number 10, I actually needed some M4 12 millimeter screws to mount the computer. The screws I'm talking about right here, they didn't come with the kit, so I needed to purchase my own for this computer mount. Another thing to know probably is number 11 is no extension cables. There are all the cables that came with the kit. We're good to go. I didn't need a speed sensor cable. I didn't need any extra cables for brake sensors or battery extensions. If you saw one of my previous videos, I did a BBS02 install on a Catrike recumbent, and that's where your feet are forward and there's 3 wheels, and I needed a bunch of extension cables. For a standard mountain bike, everything worked out for the kit. I didn't need any extra cables to purchase. If you got this far in the video, I'm very grateful and very happy, so thank you very much for watching. If you have any questions or kind comments, be sure to leave them below because I really enjoy hearing from you guys. If you want to see more videos on BBS02 or other Bafang videos, let me know. I'll go ahead and make them. I already have great ideas, and feel free to subscribe. It's absolutely free, and hope to see you in the next video. Thank you.